Is Earth being monitored by some alien intelligence with surveillance probes that come to our Earth? That is at least a theory that has been put forward by the director of AARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, together with Harvard professor Avi Loeb in a recent paper. Now, what's astounding is that this theory is nothing new. In fact, it's 20 years old and it had been put forward by a scientist that you wouldn't expect, a SETI scientist. And that is exactly the person that I'm talking to right now. Welcome to the show, Dr. Eamonn Ansbro.
Thank you for inviting me, Robert.
Thank you so much for being here. You have been an astronomer for 30 years. You are a distinguished member of the SETI community. You are a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society. You are director of the Kingsland Observatory in Northern Ireland, and you're also Ireland's representative in the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research, ICER. Now, when you heard this about the paper, didn't it strike you like, wow, now finally I'm being confirmed?
Yes, I felt vindicated because when I presented that theory back, well over 20 years ago to the SETI community, I was literally ostracized after. Yeah, it's great that this has happened.
Let's go into the paper of Professor Loeb and Dr. Kirkpatrick first. So this is, you can see it here on my screen. It is this paper, Physical Constraints of Unidentified Aerial Phenomena. And could you please summarize for us what is written in this paper?
Well, it goes into the physical constraints or the physical characteristics of the UAP, goes into some of the mathematics behind it. But what's suggested in the theory is that it's some sort of a mothership that's delivering probes to the Earth. So it's a sort of similar thinking Avi Loeb has from the UMA research he did back 4 years ago. They came out with this, the paper and book. It was a sensational book that came out worldwide on this.
But of course, the Oumuamua is an object out in space, and we're talking about this kind of object here. And this is going to show you here declassified video that was just recently classified for the latest UAP hearing in the US Senate. This video is from the Middle East. We know nothing about this, but there's this weird metallic, shiny, spherical object that is zipping through the image, and the camera is following it. We can watch it again. So there they've been observing terrorists or some other people. And suddenly there's this thing. Camera follows it. Mm-hmm. And you're saying this could be actually a surveillance probe, an automated surveillance probe coming from some mothership.
Yes, I would agree with Avi Loeb on this. And in fact, I actually went further into detail on the theory of how it might operate. And that's based on 30,000 reports going back to the 1880s. So I was showing in the theory that we have some sort of programmed, controlled surveillance of the Earth by these probes, but it's based on having, say, some sort of supercraft either in the upper stratosphere or beyond to deliver these particular probes on specific orbital tracks, which we actually discovered. Another colleague and myself, we discovered that there were 660 orbital tracks going around the Earth, which would intersect at particular locations on the Earth. And where the intersections take place is where the events also may take place as well. So what's exciting about the theory at the time when we presented it, which I think was a bit dramatic for the audience, but I had to put it down as a theory, not as a, that it's actually happening. But it is testable, and we actually did test it in 27 locations in 8 countries over the years, and we got an 80% fit, with the theory.
Wow, that's fascinating, and I can't believe I had never heard about this before. That's really fascinating. Before we go into this, let me ask you, how was your idea received back then? Because this is the paper that you presented, right? Here, that is from January 2001. One of the 2 papers that you presented about this. How did your colleagues from SETI react to this?
Oh, not too good, because they assumed that as another astronomer or physicist, that I would be presenting similar material like others over the 3-day period. And I was surprised, actually, the paper was accepted beforehand. And I understood after, when I met some of the organizers, they did say to me that we assume that your paper would be the same as everybody else's, and we have a problem with your paper. And I said, well, I have no problem with the paper. I have all the data here. And after that, it caused quite a stir, because I was ostracized then to go to the dinner. My wife was spoken to independently. There was really, I seem to be a bit of a threat to the whole community for what I came up with.
Yeah, and that is weird, because this, for me as an outsider of SETI, for me, SETI looks like a community of scientists who look for new ways to get in touch or to find extraterrestrial intelligence. And when someone comes up with a new idea, one would expect them to jump on it and say, wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, well, maybe because I wasn't used to the American culture, and I had preconceptions about American culture in the sense, in the scientific community, that they would be really open to this. But it was the complete opposite, where our European colleagues actually warmed to it. And that's why I got an invitation to the European Space Agency to deliver the same paper.
Okay, so now let's go to your theory about the automated surveillance probe system, which kind of makes me think of Jacques Vallée's hypothesis of the meta-human control system, something that has a constant look at us so that we don't do anything bad, that we don't flee from the barn, or, we don't climb the fence, or we don't push the red button and destroy this beautiful little experiment that the aliens or whoever has created here on this planet. Let's go through this. You've prepared a little slideshow here, or a little presentation. I will go to slide 1. So this is the typical track of the motherships.
Okay, well, this would be one of 660 orbital tracks. So it's fairly similar to the Apollo mission back in the late 60s, where you deliver, the final probe, the lander, so to speak, on the moon. So in this case here, in the theory, you'd have a supercraft in the upper stratosphere, which most likely is stealth, so you don't necessarily see it. And at particular times, it delivers its probes. And these probes actually are then eventually seen at a much lower altitude. And this is what people are seeing as UFOs. So you can have the one probe or multiple probes.
Or Tic Tacs, like the Nimitz incident, where they were seen jumping from above the atmosphere into the atmosphere to the lower, like above the sea level, and then jump up again, right?
Yeah, okay. I mean, the Tic Tac and the similar objects that were recorded and witnessed and so forth, I haven't actually studied those at all, because I feel that they don't exactly fit how should I put it, the conventional characteristics of UFOs. Because with the UFOs, there's an interdimensional side to it, but I didn't notice that with some of the probes or constructs, Tic Tac and so forth, that others had seen.
Okay, so let's go back to your theory. So these are the sum of many orbital tracks of stealth motherships that release drones or probes into into Earth's atmosphere.
That's correct. So then, once you have the delivery of some of these probes, and they be only a short duration in time witnessed. When I say short duration, you're talking about a few minutes. And then on another orbital track, what I call the retrieval track. So the same probes are then retrieved, but on a different track, and then would enter the superstructure of the craft itself in the upper stratosphere. So this would be a continuous operation 24/7. And the only way for this to work is not it's not like having artificial satellites going around, which have natural orbits or natural tracks, you could say, going around the Earth. What's amazing about this operation is that the 660 orbital tracks are synchronized with the rotation of the Earth.
But how do you know this?
Well, because in the modeling of this, when you again, you're working on theories of but there was a number of failures doing it the conventional way. And then myself and this other gentleman working with me, we decided, well, maybe they're doing this. Maybe are they synchronizing with the Earth, which would be difficult to have a craft that's synchronized with the Earth, because they'd have to use some power to make sure that they're still orbiting. So it's not like an artificial satellite, which doesn't need power. It's only using gravity for that. But in this case, there's a combination of gravity, which is pulling it down, and then you need some power to keep it operational. So
it's like a geostationary satellite that always remains at the same position in the sky, no matter how Earth turns, or you mean it's rather the track that is geostationary, and the mothership is following?
Yes, yeah. So the tracks are stationary, or as you could say, geostationary. You know, they're synchronized with the 24/7, 24-hour rotation of the Earth. So it's a very rigid structure. But for us as human beings, if we were, say, in a craft of that type, you'd have to be generating power to keep it up the whole time. And what we've discovered is that they're already using some sort of power generation to keep them on this orbital track system. These are not exactly beyond the atmosphere. This is what I'm saying. This is not in outer space. This is within our atmosphere, but only just slightly below the borderline from space and our atmosphere. Now, as I said, it's all theoretical at this stage, at that time when we're working on it. But it actually fits nicely with not only the past events that have taken place, thousands of reports, but also we were in an amazing situation, Robert, where we, because it's a controlled surveillance, it's fully programmed. Well, that means you can find, or you could be witnessing an event in the future.
So you can. So you're saying you have reconstructed out of 30,000 UFO reports the geostationary mothership tracks around Earth that follow a programmed plan, and then that allows you to predict the appearance of UFOs at a certain location at a certain time. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. Yes.
Wow. So you said you have been testing this.
Yes.
And can you tell us more about this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the first tests we did were back in early '97, and we got our first recording, which was shown on television. There was interest from the media on this. There was nothing spectacular about it, mind you. It was a ball of light, but at least from a scientific point of view, it did show up within the qualifying times for the theory to work. We tried it another 2 times, which worked, and then decided, and I heard about another location where there was numerous amount of UFO sightings, and decided to go there. And then we got our first recording, which was shown on television.
So is that the cylindrical? Is that the
yeah?
Cylindrical?
That would be the cylindrical construct that we saw. And we've also had independently multiple witnesses to this particular construct in the daytime. So this was at nighttime when this was taken, back in mid-December 1997.
So, wow. Okay. So this is where you could actually prove that you can actually predict something with your theory.
Well, I don't use the word predict. I use windows of time, like windows of opportunity in timing. So we produced computerized timing graphs for a particular location on the Earth. And this provides the opportunity, will this event occur or not? So far, we're finding that these events do occur according to the model.
And has this model changed, or let's say, has the program changed of releasing probes since you first discovered this? Has there been any alien update to the mothership?
Well, I don't know if it's even alien.
Yeah, neither do I. I'm just saying,
I don't know, because all this work we did in during the late 1990s into the early 2000s, and I felt, well, I think we've proven it. So, we got some papers published that were controversial, of course, the public wouldn't have known about, and obviously it didn't hit the headlines. But it's like we've just been under the radar for all this time until now, that we're coming out with some of the evidence to show this.
But I mean, the implications of such a controlled, automated surveillance system by some other intelligence that is monitoring mankind on the surface of Earth has huge implications for every single aspect of our existence.
Well, very much so. This is what I I thought at the time, but no one particularly was. How should I don't think they were able to integrate the reality of this, that this is at all possible. So you can imagine the dichotomy I was in regarding this. It's probably like, I'm not saying this is not an ego trip for me, but it's sort of like Galileo trying to show the phases of Venus to the Archbishop, but they didn't want to look through the telescope. Couldn't be bothered. There was nothing there to see. So it's a sort of a similar situation, I think.
So, when you talk to Jacques Vallée, he says that the phenomenon comes in waves and it goes for a couple of months and then it goes away and then it comes again, but in another form. Does this somehow relate to your hypothesis? Or how often are probes released by that stealthy mothership, according to your theory?
Well, there's no guarantee that the probes will be delivered at that particular location. We're just going on a theory that may work. It appears to work. But like everything else, you'd have to be in so many locations around the Earth. There would be, hundreds of locations to see these events. But one would have to work out timing graphs for every single location, which would take up huge amount of time. If you have the likes of NASA funds, we could do it. I think we could have cracked it there 20 years ago, but You have to realize we're individual scientists privately doing this kind of work, which would be contrary to conventional science.
But still, you have very specific information here. You said it's a robotic probe, more within plus minus 5 kilometers either side of track. Robotic probes or craft can be 1 to 10 minutes surveying environment. Rare occasions, an occupied craft can be plus minus 20 kilometers off track if there's interesting Earth targets. Did you go more into this? Or at least, first of all, where did you get these time frames from, and how did you calculate this, or how did you model this?
Okay, well, myself and another colleague, we worked together on this. We combined all our efforts into the whole theory to work. We had incremental discoveries. What I mean by that is, after one discovery, we then find out, oh, we've discovered something else. And I'll give you that example that you've just mentioned. We anticipated that if the model worked, then the probes will be within plus or minus 2 or 3 kilometers, of the location. Now, there was some occasions where we got reports of the UFO appearing around the same time as when this event would occur, but it'd be 20 or 30 kilometers away. And the only thing we could think of is that this would be occupied craft. In other words, an occupied intelligence that wants to see more of a particular area. So that was speculation on our part, that was what was happening there.
I see. So you have more slides here in your presentation, and you have even obviously filmed and photographed some of those craft. What is it that we see here, for example?
Yeah. So from our observatory station, we have a dual ball type of light system. Now, the problem was in the early days in recording UFOs of this nature is that we found them extremely bright. And I was trying to figure out some sort of filtering system where we could observe what the structure may be made of. But we were unsuccessful in doing that. So we had recorded different types of UFOs. We'd have the ball of light type, like a plasma type of ball. Then you'd have the jewel type balls, like you're getting more than one appearing, which has been seen, of course, and recorded people's ordinary cameras over the recent years. And then there are rare type of constructs like a barbell, or sorry, a dumbbell, I mean. So it's like it's two balls with a connection to it. We picked that up, and that certainly wasn't a balloon. It went beyond the velocity of a balloon, and also the wind direction was wrong. But that was one of the constructs we surprisingly had recorded. And then the other one would be the cylindrical type we've recorded, and also on a rare occasion, a triangle.
Okay, so this is the two round constructs that you show here. And this is what you photographed with your own observatory in Kingsland, or?
Yes, yeah. We would have imaged this using video, and then we break down the frames, and then we do an analysis, a photometric analysis to do with the light source or anything else we can think of. So that was way back many years ago. We would do. So it's really an astrophysical approach you'd use in astronomy. We were just applying this to UFOs.
I see. So when you photographed all this at your observatory, and by the way, there's this artist representation of an cylindrical craft here over Love Key. Is that the place where you said UFOs show up more often?
Yes, there's a high frequency of UFOs showing up here, and it's not just the cylindrical craft, which we had filmed, We were unfortunate that we didn't get a record of this one, but this was multiply witnessed. And in fact, the people that actually had witnessed this, they could go into some detail regarding this, and we made many interviews with them to go into a lot more detail. So because what I wanted to find out was what was the propulsion system made of. And in fact, I had sort of figured that out, the dynamics and the power system of how this particular cylindrical type craft was working. So I actually go into some detail on that in another, well, it's all recorded anyway. I can always send it to you.
In another paper. Now, when you say there's this cylindrical or this place, Love Key, that's a lake or something in Northern Ireland, I assume, that stuff seems to occur there quite often. Does that mean that this is a UFO hotspot? And did you find any evidence for actual UFO hotspots on Earth where those automated surveillance probes go frequently to check something out? And if so, what would that be?
Well, certainly, okay, the Lock Key Lake, or that you just mentioned there, is one of these hotspots. And I didn't know anything about this place until other people had told me from the UK that they heard about this place was very active. So I eventually went there, and indeed it confirmed that it was an active place for this. And also the other exciting bit was that that the model actually fitted this area. In other words, the orbital tracks where the intersection took place was actually at Lock Key, and that even excited me more. And then we produced computerized timing graphs to see if these events would occur in the future, and indeed they did. And that's why we got the first recording there in mid-December 97, based on the scientific theory.
So you said there are 670 orbital tracks like this, correct?
660 orbital tracks.
660. How did you come up with this number?
Okay, well, actually, it was my colleague who had figured that one out. It's like when you combine all your research together. But he showed me in the model that we were dealing with that there was 660 that he'd come across. He didn't expand upon it any further than that. I think when you're working with other colleagues, there's only so much you can do between, well, certainly, if there's two of you doing this, and, we're not exactly funded for doing this kind of work. We have other conventional work we have to deal with. We wouldn't get a grant for anything like this, even though it's as dramatic as it is in the results.
Yeah. So did you also predict flight paths? Because I see a slide here which says flight path of the craft. What is this referring to? Okay,
yeah. Well, this is actually the intersection at Lock Key. So the cross, the cross lines you see there, that's the intersection of the orbital tracks. You have to realize it's an imaginary orbital track above the Earth. And the construct you see on the right, that was multiply witnessed in some detail using binoculars by these people. And that descended into the lake area, and then it actually disappeared. So we were trying to figure out where exactly did it disappear, because you're dealing with an object that's about 30 meters in length by 3 or 4 meters wide, so to speak.
You mean probably it dived into the lake?
Well, we don't know. What's interesting is that they saw it descending, and they were there watching the descent, and then the next thing it disappeared. And I thought, gosh, there's obviously some other dynamics in operation here. So then we decided there back in 2006, could there be some sort of, again, this is pseudoscience now we're going into, but there could be an interdimensional porthole. All right. So we took thousands of images of the area to see if something might show up. And we did find this shimmering type of light showing up on the recording. And then a few months later, we took multiple images again. We had to go out on a boat to do this. And then we found a similar type of shimmering effect at this location. So again, I'm not saying that this is an interdimensional porthole, but it's interesting. There is a correlation there where this particular object disappeared.
I mean, of course, this is pseudoscience, but it is worthwhile mentioning that also your colleague Erling Strand from Norway talks about seeing a portal himself or something like this when he was on a fishing expedition. He was looking into the sky. It was daylight, and he looked up, and there was this black hole with a lot of nothingness in it. It was like, he said, it was like as if you look into something else. And then, of course, there are the reports from Skinwalker Ranch about alleged portals. I don't know what to make of this, but it's really interesting. So how do you actually measure all this? And what's the instrumentation that you use? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think it's important when you're dealing with such a phenomena that is still unknown, that you offer so many sensors in a wide range of the spectrum to detect something. So what I decided actually was to use 11 cameras that had high sensitivity sensors and to cover the whole sky. In that, we developed a program which broke up the sky into thousands of a virtual grid. So you have thousands of little squares, because when you have an understanding of UFO characteristics, UFOs can either manifest themselves or they just appear and they start moving around fast. So in the design
what's the difference between they manifest themselves and they just appear?
Well, in the sky, a UFO may manifest itself. It just appears. And these UFOs have been recorded that way. They would appear or manifest, if that's the other language you'd like to use, and on occasions they would disappear. They would wink out, as some people would call it. All right. Then you have the movement of the UFO, which has been known for decades, this zigzag type movement, or it squares upon itself. So in order to design instrumentation for something like that, you need an all-sky camera system. So it's made up of 11 cameras. That's the center picture there. And it covers the 360 degrees of the sky plus the zenith, the upper part of the sky as well. So you have a virtual grid of the whole sky. So if a UFO manifests or appears itself in one of the squares, it's automatically recording it anyway. But ideally, you need to do a close-up of the object. So I developed 2 tracking platforms, which are 150 meters apart. These will be powerful telephoto type camera systems, about 250 millimeters focal length. And this would give you a close-up of the UFO, not just in the visible region, but also in the infrared, because I found through research that UFOs are predominant in the infrared region as compared to the visible. Another sensor was put on based on gamma rays, because there has been detection of gamma rays from UFOs. In other words, there's a high radiation count from the ambient from a UFO. So so the two tracking platforms not only would pick up the UFO based on the all-sky camera system, the 11 cameras, but also you can find out through the triangulation the distance to the UFO as well.
I see. And there are more images of your tracking facility, which looks quite sophisticated. How do you finance all this?
Well, I privately financed it myself.
Really?
Yeah.
Now that's fascinating. I mean, this with all the results that you have shown so far, one would assume that someone would pick it up and show some interest and probably finance this from the SETI community.
Well, it's still possible, but you have to appreciate that the times I was doing this, the whole UFO area was a bad mantra, if you like to put it that way. So if you're trying to get funding, it was very, very unlikely. So the best thing I could do was any funds that I had, I invested in it because I felt this is the only way if we're going to, make a breakthrough.
See, and this is something that I'd always wanted to ask some open-minded SETI scientists, and I've talked to some of your colleagues without mentioning names, but who are leading figures in the field. The first thing I've never understood is why have people from SETI always been ignoring UFOs, even though it may be the hottest trace towards extraterrestrial intelligence that you could ever get?
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm laughing. I've been through the mill, on this one.
It's good you're still laughing.
Yeah, for such a serious topic. Okay, there's a really, Robert, a psychological thing here. There's a perception problem. There's a worldview problem. There's like the assumption that the world does this and nothing else. So when the UFO then comes into position, metaphorically speaking, it's like they just cannot integrate that reality in there. So you'd have to be a natural type scientist, not a fixated type of scientist that physics does this and nothing else, and not accepting the larger reality that's there, where was there actually 200 years ago in science. I mean, in physics up to the 1830s, you had metaphysics, which took in the real reality of the universe. But metaphysics was taken out of the equation. And then you had this cultural transformation then back in the 1830s, where governments then were investing in, mechanistic science, so to speak. And that's been really the problem until right now. And it still is, actually. So I can see, and I do respect the approach that's taken to do with SETI, but it's not taken in the larger reality of this as well. Science wants to see evidence and so forth, but some of this is subjective, and you have to take in the subjective side of things as well in science. So that would make it meta science or metaphysics, so to speak.
Yeah, and then the other question is, I remember a lecture that I attended in 2009 in Potsdam in Germany. Frank Drake was there at the Astrophysical Institute of the University of Potsdam, and he closed his lecture with the words, "We still haven't found anything, but we are making progress." And I mean, and he had explained that they were looking in the microwave spectrum because that is the spectrum of frequencies that we also use to communicate with our satellites, that we use for communication with our spaceships. And so this should be the place where it has to be, where they should be looking. And I was wondering, how does he know that ETs may, or whoever may be using this bandwidth to communicate? I mean, we've been doing radio for 90 years now or so.
Yeah, I mean, Frank Drake and many others do not know how extraterrestrials operate, if there are extraterrestrials there. So you also have to take consideration that we've only dealing with radio and microwave as instrumentation for it for only 100 years. But extraterrestrials out there, extraterrestrial civilizations, probably going thousands of years, and would have gone beyond using radio and the microwave into the whole quantum universe, using quantum type of communications. You can see it on the next slide I have coming up, that I presented this to SETI previously, not that particular one, but dealing with, this one here. So if you have an extraterrestrial civilization that's 50, 100, 500 light years away, and assuming that it understands its planetary affairs, for its planet, very much aligned to the planet, then it's in a position in its evolution to go to other star systems. Now, it's most likely they're not going to be using chemical rockets. It'll be out of the question. So you'd have to be using some sort of faster than light type of travel to do this. And I show in this particular slide here that, and this is possibility, again, it's a hypothesis, that if we are dealing with the ETH, the extraterrestrial hypothesis, and they're coming from wherever, I think they're most likely using some sort of FTL travel. So you'd have, you start off accelerating to a point where you can jump into what's called hyperspace. So in other words, we are as physical beings in the space-time as we are now, and they would be the same, but they would have the technology to jump into hyperspace, where yes, it's space, but there's no time, and then flip out into the next stellar system they want to go to. Now, the longest period of time, interesting enough, is the time it takes for accelerating in your stellar system or your solar system, as we have here now. It may take 2 or 3 hours to speed up to the speed of light before you jump into hyperspace. And likewise, doing the opposite, going to your stellar system, which could be 500 light years away. But you could be only talking about a number of hours to actually get to another star system, and not years, as we're dealing with at the present time. And as to the communications, they're definitely not using radio and microwave if you're dealing with that quantum world that they would be operating in. You'd have to be using faster than light communications or quantum superluminal communications.
And yet radio frequency has been observed in a number of cases, to the point that the director of AARO, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, says this is a common characteristic of UAPs, which he just presented. He said they receive intermittent radio signals in the 1 to 3 gigahertz and 8 to 12 gigahertz band, the X band. So there seems to be radio frequency involved.
Yeah, well, they're in our space-time. Yeah, it may be. Look, there's a lot of guesswork in this because you're dealing with the unknown, but taking what you've just mentioned there, indeed, they could be using microwave here in our space-time, but maybe using other communication systems that would be we would be ignorant of because we wouldn't have the instrumentation to receive.
Now, another question I have, coming back to the hyperspace, jumping into hyperspace. You just said that it takes hours to accelerate to the speed of light in order to be able to jump into hyperspace, if I understood you correctly. But then that doesn't fit quite to the observations that many people make, that those UFOs are there, and then from one blink of an eye, 1 second to the other, they're just gone, They don't accelerate, and go. Where do they go? How do they do this?
Well, before you go into that, taking your first point there about the movement, if you go back to a previous slide that wasn't shown, this is the one where the craft is actually resonating at a certain frequency, and then it goes through a number of frequencies, and this has been witnessed. That's the one. This has been witnessed where it goes through different colors. Well, these would be like different resonances or different frequencies it would go through before it would jump into this hyper accelerated rate, leading to to the speed of light, so to speak, and then disappearing. But this has been a common characteristic of UFOs, going through these different color changes.
I think that was someone in South America, right? Carlos, what's his name? Carlos Diaz. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who saw this and who filmed this? That's really interesting. So, all right, okay. So now the big question is, coming back to SETI, this is called Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. What if this is not an extraterrestrial intelligence? And the whole concept of SETI is wrong in that they are assuming that it comes from outside our Earth. What if we should rather call this not extraterrestrial intelligence, but let's say unidentified intelligent manifestation or something like that? Wouldn't that be a more appropriate term for what we are dealing with?
Yeah, because there's so many things. Okay, there's so many categories in this. It's, extraterrestrial hypothesis to that they've already been here all this time. So they're actually they're occupants of the Earth, but we don't see where their base is. And most likely would be, say, in the ocean somewhere, possibly, because they have been seen coming out of the oceans. There's also a more, how shall I put it, a much more heavier type of hypothesis thinking, and that is when you look at the hundreds of encounters that have taken place with human beings, what does it tell you? What are the characteristics behind this? One of the key characteristics is that there's, and this fits in beautifully in quantum mechanics, and that is consciousness. So there's a consciousness connection taking place here. Any of these encounters that I've researched out over years, it's not a situation that someone is talking to you, physically talking to you. There's a telepathic link, which telepathy has been proven. There is research to show that this is the evidence for telepathy.
Yeah, the Russians have successfully proven that this is, and the Americans have taken note of this and written it down in declassified DIA papers, I think. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a telepathic link using consciousness. So if you take our brain, a brain you would see as the processor for this universe with its consciousness, or this conscious universe, so to speak. It's like an intelligent universe. So when the UFO comes along, we'll say at an encounter, there's a number of things happen. One is there's a psychic component, if you like to call it, which seems to open up the human being from its current perception of life and everything, because there's what I would call a transformative process taking place after the impact of an encounter, and there's certainly a lot of evidence to show that people change from the impact of it. They become more aligned to the environment, to the earth and so forth, where before they were completely disconnected from nature, so to speak. So what does that mean? Does it, the intelligence is trying to do that to balance out the universe? Or should I say that, well, we know that nature knows nothing else but balance. All right. And maybe the UFO is coming into position. And this is from a completely different approach now. It doesn't mean it's extraterrestrial, but it's something to do with the whole conscious universe, where it's projecting itself through the whole nature intelligence to offer to the human being a way of communicating to change one's ways, as you like to. So I'm just thinking of Jacques Vallée here a little bit. This control sort of operation that goes in his theory.
The long-term sociological operation taking place. I mean, it makes sense, right? It could be something like an impulse coming from outside that points us to the fact that we know nothing and there is something bigger than we are.
Yeah. I mean, you have to take all these categories, Robert. You can't get fixated in one area. You have to open up to so many categories. But that's also based on not the objective mechanistic data that one gets, but also the subjective area, bringing in metaphysics. You really have to take in all this experiential stuff that people go through. And there's thousands of people that go through this, and you can't sort of take that out of the equation. But when you do put it into the equation, you seem to come up with a different answer to this. It may not be what we're thinking. That has something to do with nature intelligence. It's if it's creating the constructs that would be acceptable for the human being. I mean, if you take, for example, the many religions around the world, in India with the various deities and that, these constructs or archetypes do show up for that particular culture. And likewise, when you take the America, which is on the extreme end of the spectrum when it comes to culture, a mix of culture, but shooting for the stars, so to speak, then it's sort of back to Jacques Vallée again, Passport to Mogonia, where it's coming in forms to suggest, well,
to make us acquainted to the idea that
when it's something when you're acquainted with stuff, you accept and say, oh yeah, that was a spaceship or whatever, maybe it wasn't, because somebody else nearby may not have seen that spaceship at all. They're actually looking in the same location, but they don't see it as a spaceship. And there is actually proof for that in Brazil when the Blessed Virgin Mary showed up to some people. But then other people said they didn't see that. They saw something else, so it's...
The same in Fatima in Portugal, where people saw flying crosses, flying eggs, flying whatever. Some saw the Virgin, only 3 of them saw the Virgin Mary. Others saw just a weird cloud. Mm-hmm. So this is a psychic phenomenon. So this is something that projects itself into the minds of the people. It is not what you see is not what you think it is not what it actually is.
Well, if you take, for example, the most recent stuff to do with the Nimitz, and particularly the Tic Tac, when it moved off and to go to what they call it, the Cat Point, I think it is, this secret location that no one knows about except some individuals in the military, and yet it was there in a number of seconds. And to me, that sounds like, gee, I mean, either if it's black operations, I could understand, but the other is, it would make more sense if this is a consciousness connection that it already knows through the consciousness of others that,
right.
because the
it doesn't have to decipher the highly encrypted military channels in order to find out where the Cat Point is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So my last question, Eamonn, do you think that whatever this is will ever engage in something like an official contact with representatives of Earth?
I think that's only possible if you go through. Okay, it's actually going. Okay, I think as a collective in society, if we agree that not only is it reality, but if we're comfortable enough for to make the contact. At this point in time, most people are not ready for the contact, never mind knowing the reality of UFOs. I mean, the contact has been made to individuals, thousands of them around the world. But as a collective, I think it'll only happen if there's a mutual collective agreement for something like this. It doesn't mean it's going to be in words, but it'd be like showing itself in the media as, well, I think we're all ready for this. You know, we know. And I think what may happen, and again, this is only hypothesized, is that as we go towards that direction, then the intelligence will come to us, so to speak. So that's how I think the connection will take place on a bigger scale.
So it's going to happen more often. People will see more things in the sky. That's what you're predicting.
Yes, I think I'm convinced about that because research I've carried out many years ago shows that the more people that agree to this or do see the UFOs, and there'll be people that want to see the UFOs and that, it's like you may well see a UFO, but you have to have the right approach, attitude, whatever, you know, for this to happen.
Wow, fascinating. Thank you so much, Dr. Eamonn Ansbro, for this fascinating interview. I hope we'll be able to repeat this and to talk about some other stuff, because I know you've also been engaged in subjects even more fringe than that, and all of this in a scientific way, which is so fascinating. So thank you so much, Dr. Eamonn Ansbro.
You're welcome, Robert.
For this interview. Thank you so much for being here. Bye. And thank you also for watching, and think about it. Isn't it a fascinating idea that our world is in fact much bigger than what we have been able to think? See you. Bye.